Okay, good morning, my Eco 2301 students. So up to this point, we have completed 4 chapters, so we're proceeding really well. Remember, your exam is going to be next week. I'm trying to see whether I should assign you guys those exam on either Tuesday or Wednesday. So I'll make that call. I'll send you guys an email by Monday to confirm. Maybe also do a little bit of review what you need to start about. I'll send you guys like a one-page review, kind of highlighting what you need to focus on for the first exam. So up to this point, we have completed the chapter on demand and supply. We talked about the concept of supply. We discussed at length factors that drive the supply curve, shift the supply curve left or right. We also look at the demand side of the market, beginning with the law of demand. We talk about the distinction between a change in demand and a change in quantity demanded. And we discuss at length as well factors that shift the demand curve to the left or to the right. And then we put demand and supply into context, into an equilibrium. So when supply and demand are in equilibrium, that helps to determine the equilibrium market price and equilibrium quantity for goods and services. So today, we're going to continue along that line. We're going to start talking about a concept, a popular concept in microeconomics. We are also going to be utilizing the demand and supply. We're going to talk about the concept of price elasticity of demand. So price elasticity of demand is not the demand curve. It's not the slope of a demand curve, but it's going to be derived from a demand curve for sure. Okay, it includes the slope and plus some other things. It basically shows how consumers respond, okay, by changing the quantity they're demanding for goods and services anytime there's a change in price, okay? So this concept is very important, especially many of you who might in the future want to start your small business or even a big business. If you're producing a good, you don't just raise the price of that good, blindly. You want to investigate and show what type of good you're producing. So whether it has elastic demand or inelastic demand, that guides you how you should vary your prices over time. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. So this is chapter 5, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So here's my screen. So you can see elasticity and its application. So the outline or the learning objective, we're going to talk about the elasticity of demand. Then we'll talk about the application of elasticity of demand elasticity, and then we'll also talk about elasticity of supply and its application. And then we can use elasticity for quick predictions. Okay, and then of course appendix to this chapter also give you knowledge of other type of elasticity like income elasticity or cross elasticity of demand. So anyway, but we're going to be focusing primarily on price elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply. So in this chapter, we're going to develop the tools of demand and supply elasticity. Again, in chapter 4, we discuss how to shift the supply and demand curves to produce qualitative predictions about changes in equilibrium price and equilibrium quantities. Estimating elasticity is the first step in quantifying how changes in demand and supply will affect prices and quantities. So elasticity of demand, what does it measure? So as I said, elasticity of demand is measuring how responsive consumers respond to changing quantity demanded of a good when there's a price change, okay? Because we know that, from the law of demand already, we talked about in chapter 4. The law of demand says that when there's an increase in price of a good, consumers will decrease the quantity demanded. But then now what we're going to do here, we'll be able to quantitatively actually measure to what extent will the consumers reduce the quantity demanded of a good for any given price change. So we want to quantitatively measure that. So when consumers respond a lot by cutting demand for goods and services anytime there's a price change, let's say price goes up by 1 percentage point and consumers cut the quantity demanded by more than 1 percentage point. So you can see that the response of them changing the quantity, decreasing quantity, is more than the percentage change in the price in the first place. then we say those goods have got what we call elastic demand. But if consumers don't respond that much to any given price change, then we say those goods have got inelastic demand. I'm going to give you just from the back of my mind. If somebody is addicted to smoking cigarettes, okay, because cigarette addiction, so I know, if the price of cigarettes or tobacco goes up, it's not like if somebody was smoking a pack a day, it's not like they're going to cut the how many cigarettes they're smoking maybe in half. That's not going to happen because they're addicted to it, okay? Or there could be certain medicine like insulin. When somebody has diabetes and they must take this medicine for them to survive, if the price of insulin goes up, the diabetic patients are not going to dramatically decrease the quantity demanded of insulin because they need this good for survival. And then there are several goods. There are also goods where we call it necessary goods, goods that are required for our survival, like water, food. All right, so when the price of water goes up, Americans are not going to reduce the consumption, how much they consume of water because they need water for survival. They may cut back a little, very little, but it's not going to be like a big cut. Now, contrast that to like luxury goods, like a Lamborghini. If the price of a Lamborghini increases by 1 percentage point, who cares? We're going to drive a cheaper alternative substitute car, like a Honda. So anytime the price of a luxury good like Lamborghini, Mercedes-Benz, BMWs are going up, consumers tend to reduce the quantity demanded a whole lot because they can do without a Lamborghini, okay? So we're going to talk about this. So this is going to be so think about it for a second. If you are the producer of a good, let's say you're in tobacco industry, and so you know that anytime you increase the price of tobacco, your clients, custom smokers, they're more or less going to smoke about the same amount that they were smoking before. So you're not going to lose any revenue at all. You're not going to be saying, oh, I increase the price and nobody comes to buy my stuff, because that good comes with addiction. So it guides you as a seller or the producer of a good that what price you need to charge for your product. Okay. So elasticity is not the same as a slope, as I cautioned you earlier, but they're related in a way. Elasticity rule is that if two linear demand or supply curves run through a common point, then the curve that is flatter is more elastic. You guys know that if you draw a straight line, a downward sloping demand curve, and you make it really flat. So I'm gonna draw them first separately here. If I draw two curves here, I put price on this axis and I put quantity on this axis. If I draw a demand curve like that, this demand curve is a lot flatter than this type of demand here. If I put price here, I put quantity. This is a much steeper demand curve. See that? See the difference? Steep. And you guys know that the steeper the line, the bigger its slope. So this demand curve there certainly has a much bigger slope than this guy here. Okay. So when I put all of them together, draw a flatter demand curve and a much steeper demand curve, you can see the point of intersection is at point A. Now, here's the point we're trying to make here. Let's say at point A, price was 40 on both the demand. That's the point of intersection between the two demand curves. And the quantity demanded by consumers was 100 for both types of goods that are represented by those two demand curves. Now, let's see, when the price of the good goes up from $40 to $50, you can see that the demand curve, which is flatter, consumers are going to cut back a lot. They're going to reduce quantity demanded from 100 to 20. We're going to move up to point B. So you can see that's exactly what I'm talking about. This good, which has got this flatter demand curve, those could be like luxury goods, things that consumers can do without. Anytime there's a small price change, it triggers a disproportionately larger decrease in what? In quantity demanded. But the demand curve, which is a lot steeper, you can see when we raise the price from 40 to what? To $50, consumers just cut back somewhat, only from 100 to 95. So you end up at point C. So the response of consumers to cutting back on purchasing a good depends on the most part on what type of good they're using. If the good they're using, they cannot do without it, they're not going to cut back that much. That would be illustrated by that steeper line. We move to point C. Okay, that could be goods like insulin, cigarettes, tobacco, because they're addicted to it. Somebody who's alcoholic, who's addicted to alcohol, those kind of stuff. So let's discuss on the further. So in this chapter 2, I'm going to share with you the formula that we use to calculate the price elasticity of demand, to show how responsive consumers are to cutting back or increasing demand depending on how price movements are. If the price decrease, if consumers increase a lot of their, decrease a lot of the, if the price decreases, for example, and consumers increase a lot of the quantity demanded, that's going to be like goods with elastic demand. So it goes both ways. Either decrease in price triggers a disproportionately larger decrease in quantity demanded, or an increase in price triggers a disproportionately larger increase in the quantity demanded. So we'll talk about that. Okay, now let's talk about the determinants of elasticity of demand. What makes consumers respond a whole lot to the purchase of certain goods anytime there's a price change, and what triggers consumers to respond less to buying a product anytime there's an increase in price. So the first is going to be the ease in finding substitutes. Okay, so if a consumer, if the consumers are buying a product where there are no close substitutes, I'll give you one example. If you go to a town, most towns in America, you might find there's only one electric company. Like your electric company, only one in town. So there's not a lot of substitutes. It's not so when the electric company raises the price of your electricity, of electricity, you don't have a choice because that's the only option. You don't have a lot of substitutes available. It's not like there's so many electric companies in town where if one company raises the price, you're just gonna go to another electric company. So you're not gonna be cutting back a lot the consumption of electricity because your electric company in your hometown or where you live has raised the price of electricity. So that's a clear example. So electric companies, these are products where you cannot easily find close substitutes. Okay. So that means consumers are going to respond very limited. So that means if the price of the good goes up by 1 percentage point, the decrease in quantity demanded is going to be by less than 1 percentage point. There's a small disproportionate response to cutting quantity demanded for any small change in the price. Okay, and then the second factor which determine whether the good has elastic or inelastic demand is time to adjust to price change. When you give it a little bit of time, more time means that we have more substitutes. That's greater elasticity, right? But if time is limited, then sometimes you don't have time to adjust. Okay. And then also we're going to talk about the definition of the commodity. Narrow definition, specific brand, more substitutes, greater elasticity. We have goods which have very specific brand names. You don't have a lot of substitutes available. Then those good consumers will not, the consumers are going to respond a lot in that case for any small price increase because they can buy from somewhere else, right? Okay. And then I talk about the necessities versus luxuries. If a consumers find out the goods they're using are necessary, they don't have a choice. Like water, you need water. Water is a necessary good. Food is a necessary good. Okay. Then an increase in the price of water is going to trigger disproportionately less response by consumers to cutting back the quantity demanded. So the demand for water is going to be inelastic. Compare that with the demand for a luxury good like a Lamborghini. When the price of a Lamborghini goes up by 1 percentage point, who cares? We're going to drive a Honda or, Toyota, cheaper alternatives, substitutes, right? So luxury goods have greater elasticity, necessary goods have smaller elasticity, so they're more inelastic. The smaller the elasticity, the more inelastic a good is. The bigger the elasticity is, the more elastic the good is. And then the other factor that determines whether the good is going to have elastic versus inelastic demand is a share of budget devoted to the good. If the consumer devotes a larger share of their income to buying a good, meaning that that good takes a bigger chunk of your paycheck or your spending, then those goods are going to have more greater elasticity. They're going to be more elastic. But if a good takes a disproportionately insignificant share of your income, like a pack of gum, for example, with the price of a pack of gum goes up and you like chewing gum, it's not like you're going to, because the tech is very cheap already anyway. You're more or less going to continue buying the same amount of the packs of gum that you've been consuming before. Okay, so if the good takes a smaller proportion of your income or your spending, that good is going to have inelastic demand. But if it takes a larger share of your spending or your income, then it's going to have greater elasticity. It's going to be more elastic. You're going to respond more to changing the quantity demanded for any given price change. So I summarized those factors here in the red table that are highlighted in red. Goods which are less elastic, meaning that they're inelastic. So when I say less elastic, another way of saying it, we say that they have inelastic demand. When it's more elastic, we just say these goods have elastic demand. It means the response of consumers are greater than the change in price. Okay, so that's kind of like a small summary of it. So now, I wanted to check your understanding here, which I mentioned earlier. Would demand for BMW cars be more elastic or less elastic than demand for cars in general? Because BMW tend to be luxury. Not every American drives a BMW. More like a luxury good. Okay, so I would argue that the demand for a BMW are more elastic compared to the demand for other cars in general, like Toyota, Honda. Okay, so specific brands are more elastic than general categories, like BMW have more elastic demand because they tend to be luxury goods. Okay, so now let me take you straight to how do we calculate elasticity of demand, which you can also call it specifically price elasticity of demand. So there are two formulas that I'm going to show you, and every time I'm going to ask you a question, I'm going to ask you whether you use the general formula or what they call the midpoint formula. So the general formula is that because elasticity, by definition, elasticity of demand, we are measuring the general responsiveness of how consumers change their demand for good, how they respond to a given price change. Okay, so that means the formula is going to be elasticity of demand is going to be because of percentage change in the quantity demanded. How much in percentage do consumers change their quantity demanded divided by as a result of percentage change in price. This is a very simple formula. You just take percentage change. If I have like a demand curve like this, price, quantity, okay, and then we say, let's say the price was here, maybe price was $50 and quantity demanded is what, maybe say 100, and that's, so we are on the point A on the demand curve, and then the price of the good goes up by say to $60. Okay, so we want to see how consumers cut back. Maybe this might go to $80, whatever it is. Okay, so now we want to see in percentage. You guys know how to calculate percentage change. When something price went from 50 to 60, you know how to calculate. You take 60 minus 50 divided by 50 times 100. That's a percentage change in price. And then the percentage change in quantity. Remember, quantity has gone down. This is your new quantity. You take the new quantity minus the old quantity times the old quantity, divide by old quantity times 100. Then you just plug them in this formula. Very straightforward. We're going to do a couple of examples here. And then there's a second formula which we call the midpoint average as the base. Okay. So the change in quantity demanded, we want to see how what the midpoint formula tells you is that if you have a linear demand, the reason why we develop a midterm formula, if you have a linear demand curve, it's possible that sometimes consumers may respond more or less depending on which point you're on the demand curve. Okay. So so what we're going to do here is to avoid that, we economists, we use what we call the midpoint formula. And it's very, very straightforward. Okay, so if I have to calculate the midpoint, you take the change in quantity demand, and you remember the example I gave you earlier when the consumers reduced demand from, was it 100 to 80? And then you divide by the average quantity. You take the averages of those two quantities between 100 and 80. So you take 100 plus 80 divided by 2, you know how to get the average of two quantities. And then you're going to take the change in price. You know, our price went from, was it 50 to 60? So you're going to get the change 60 minus 50 divide by the average price, which is 60 plus 50 divided by 2. So here's what the formula in general looks like. It's very, very straightforward. I'm going to do an example shortly, so you get to see what I'm talking about here. So let's go straight here. So for example here, we are saying here that suppose the price of a good was $40. See, before, and then after the price change, the price is now 50. And then consumers, before the price was 40, when the price was 40, consumers were demanding 100 units of this good. When the price went from 40 to 50, they cut back from 100 to 20. So when I ask you to use the midpoint formula, you are going to talk about you talk about the change in quantity. See, so you're just going to plug everything in this formula here. Change in quantity, which is going to be quantity after minus quantity before, divided by the average of those two quantities, which is a quantity after plus quantity before, divide by 2. That's how you get the average. Then divide by the change in price, which is the price after after the change minus price before the change, divided by the averages of those two prices. So if you do your formula, you plug in the numbers correctly, you see the numerator is going to be 20 minus 100 is negative 80, divided by 60. 20 plus 100 divided by 2 is 60, and then here 50 minus 40 is what? 50 minus 40 is, I think there's a typo here though. Yeah, just be careful. 50 minus 40 is your negative 10. So change that's positive 10. Okay. Okay, divide by 50 plus 40 divided by 2, that is 45. So you can see that the numerator negative 80 divided by 6 is negative 1.33. 10 divided by 45 is 0.22. So when you divide it, you get negative 6. Okay. Okay. So now what is the interpretation of this? Of this number that you get? You can see that this is basically saying that when you calculate the midpoint, whatever, it's not in percent, it's in actual units. This number is telling you that anytime the price of the good goes up by 1 unit, okay, a unit price increase of a good is going to trigger a decrease in the quantity demanded by 6 units. So you can see that the response of consumers to decreasing the quantity demanded is way outweighs the increase in price in the first place. So this good definitely has got what we call elastic demand, in the sense that, and I'm gonna give a summary. If the price elasticity of demand, the elasticity of demand you calculate is any number greater than 1, that means the good has got elastic demand. If it's less than 1, it means that good has got inelastic demand. That means for every unit price increase, consumers reduce quantity demanded by less than 1 unit. That good is going to be what? Will have inelastic demand. This is what we call unit elastic. Unit elastic basically means that a 1 unit increase in price leads to a 1 unit decrease in quantity. So it's like 1 to 1. Okay. All right. So let's check your understanding here. What is the elasticity of demand if a price drops from $4 to $3? Causes quantity to increase from 120 to 150. Again, you're going to use the formula for midpoint. The answer there is going to be 0.778. But how do we do it? The solution is where do I put the solution? I didn't. Okay, but you can walk through the answers here. Like a formula I showed you. What is that? Let's go back. Oh, yes, right here. No, this was, yeah, that's right. So the price dropped from $4 to $3. Quantity increased from 120 to 150. You can see using the mid whatever. You're gonna take the change in quantity. Quantity went from 120 to 150. So 150 minus 120 divided by the average of the two quantities. Divide by 150 plus 120, divide by 2. That's the average. You take the average. Now we're going to divide that again by the change in price. Price went from 4 to 3, so 3 minus 4, divided by the average of those two prices. So you can see clearly this is going to be, to work out the math correctly, this is just going to be negative 0.778. Now, you can see clearly here, the number that we have got here, negative 0. If you take the absolute value of that number, is less than 1. Okay, when I talk about absolute value, it means you disregard the negative. So it'll be 0.778. That's a number less than 1. What's the interpretation? Now, this is saying that when the price decreased by 1 unit, consumers increase the quantity demanded by less than 1 unit. That's right. Or if we had calculated using the percentage change formula, that would be saying that a 1 percentage point increase in the price leads to a less than 1 percentage point decrease in quantity. Or the other, you can say the other way around. A 1 percentage point decrease in price triggers a less than 1 percentage point increase in quantity demanded. And that's exactly that, because that would be opposite direction. We're talking about demand here. So I already talked about this. Anytime you calculate the price elasticity of demand and you take the absolute value, this whatever you see this sign, that means absolute. If that absolute value of that elasticity of demand is greater than 1, like the one we calculated earlier was 6, then the demand for that good is elastic. I mean, again, I want to emphasize that elastic means consumers respond a whole lot by decreasing the quantity demanded for any small increase in price. Okay, so if price were to go up by 1 percentage point, okay, the quantity demanded would decrease by more than 1 percentage point. Then we say that good is going to have elastic demand. The second one, inelastic goods, which have got inelastic demand, like cigarettes, like insulin, like necessary goods like water, food. If there's an increase in the price of a good, because these are necessary goods, you need them for survival, consumers are going to decrease the quantity demanded by less than 1 percentage point. They don't cut back that much because they say they need that good for survival. And then this is a case where we call it unit elastic. If you find that a 1 percentage increase, you calculate the price elasticity of demand and it's -1, or in its absolute value is 1. That means a 1 unit increase in the price leads to a 1 unit decrease in the quantity. Or a 1 percentage point increase in price leads to a 1 percentage point decrease in quantity demanded. Then the good is, as God what? Unit elastic. We call it as unit elastic. It's unit elastic. Yeah. Okay. And and you guys can, after learning this type of you get this type of theoretical knowledge about elasticity of demand, you could go to like different industries in America and do some research to try to kind of establish which goods in America consumers cut back a lot for any small price increase. You can survey maybe the CEOs of major companies that are producing goods and services, maybe iPhones. Maybe you can survey like any particular products from Amazon, car demand, different types of car brands out there. You can interview the dealerships, because all you gotta do is just let the dealership give you their pricing information, and they keep that. They will keep the logbook of their pricing information. If you go to the dealership, whether Ford dealership, they may have the price of a vehicle at Ford, like say F-150, is not static. Those dealers always change the price almost on a daily basis. You go today, it might be $30,999. You go back tomorrow, they drop the price to $28,899, those kind of stuff. So your job is that go ask them, when the price went up from this much to this much, how much did consumers buy? And then you basically you're just collecting data on prices and quantity, and then calculating the price elasticity of demand. You may also find that maybe someone may actually do a nice research and show that maybe the price elasticity of demand varies during different times of the year. Maybe during holiday season, people are buying a lot of luxury goods for their loved ones. They're buying cars. Maybe the price elasticity of cars like Honda or Toyota or whatever it is, or Ford, is gonna be more inelastic during holiday season than during off-holiday season. So there's so many research topics that you can think about where you can try. But even you yourself, if you become successful where you start up your own business and you start producing a particular product, the knowledge of price elasticity of the product you're producing is very important to determining whether you're going to profit maximize or not. Because if you start changing the price randomly or blindly, then you may lose all your customers, and your business can go to bankruptcy, can go out of business. So you have to be very careful. You need to study closely how your customers respond anytime you change the price of your product a little bit. If the response is, if any small percentage increase in the price level of your product triggers a disproportionately large decrease in quantity demanded, then it's not a wise idea to be raising prices for your product. You may lose all the customers. Okay, so it's very, very important from a business standpoint. Okay, so when a price elasticity of demand is 1.27, it means the demand is elastic. I told you that anytime the price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, and number 1.27 is a number greater than 1, that good has got elastic demand. Okay. Okay, now let's talk about the relationship between total revenues and elasticity of demand. Certainly, the revenues that a firm or a company is going to derive will depend on the price elasticity of demand. Okay, you guys know the formula for revenue. Revenue, you take price of a good times the total number of units sold. Okay, so for example, if the price, or let's say you're producing smartphones, if the price of a smartphone is say $900, and your company has produced and sold maybe 50 smartphones, then your revenue is a product of price and quantity, P times Q, which in this case is going to be $900 times 50, which would be that's going to be 9,000 times 5. That is $45,000. There you go. So that's the formula for revenue is pretty straightforward. You multiply the per unit price times the total number of units that are being sold, produced, and sold. So now the question is, how do you maximize revenue? You need to think about how what your price elasticity of demand is. Because I already told you, when a good has got elastic demand, if you increase the price here, this price goes up. You know that the consumers, the reduction in quantity is going to be way more than what? The increase in price, because that's what unit is, something like more than 1. That if the price goes up by 1 percentage point, consumers are going to reduce the quantity demanded by more than 1 percentage point. So for goods which have got elastic demand, if you raise the price of your product, revenue is going to fall. But for goods which have got inelastic demand, so okay, let me back up again. Okay, so I said only one direction. Goods which have got elastic demand, an increase in price triggers a disproportionately larger decrease in quantity demanded. So the product of P and Q overall is going to go down, which is your revenue. And then again, on the other way around, if you decrease the price, it triggers a disproportionately larger increase in quantity demanded. So your so when you're producing a good which has got elastic demand, it makes good business sense to always decrease the price of that product if you want to maximize revenue. But if your good has got inelastic demand, you know that the response of consumers towards reducing the quantity demanded for any small increase in price is going to be marginal. It's going to be very small. So if a good has got inelastic demand, like a demand for cigarettes, any increase because consumers of this product are get addicted to smoking. So if you raise the price of tobacco, you know, smokers are not going to reduce tremendous amount of cigarette smoke per day. They're more or less going to buy about the same quantity. So, and that means an increase in price triggers a very small decrease in quantity demanded. So the entire product P times Q is going to go up. So it makes proper business sense. If you're producing a good with inelastic demand, you need to be raising the price, then you will maximize revenue. If you want to decrease revenue, you lower the price. Of course, you don't want to do that, because the goal of a company is always profit maximization. You want to maximize revenue. Okay. So that's the relationship between total revenue and elasticity. So revenue, I summarize them here. If the demand curve is inelastic, then revenue is going to increase when you increase the price. That means revenue will decrease if you decrease the price. So there's a positive correlation between revenue, total revenue, and prices you set for your good, if your good has got inelastic demand. But if you're dealing in a product which has got elastic demand, then there's a negative correlation between revenues and price, meaning that if you increase the price, revenues will fall for goods with elastic demand. Consumers are going to reduce a lot the amount they're buying, so that you're going to lose revenue overall. Okay, let's do an example here. So so you see, I have two types of demand curve here. Demand curve which is flatter, we say it has got what? Elastic demand. The elasticity of demand is always greater than 1 when you calculate it. A steeper demand curve like this, those are goods with inelastic demand, meaning that an increase in price, a 1 percentage point increase in price triggers a disproportionately smaller decrease in quantity demanded. Quantity demanded might decrease by less than 1%. But if the demand curve is flat, the flatter the demand curve, remember, the bigger the slope. That means any increase in price is going to trigger a disproportionately larger decrease in quantity demanded. So you lose revenue here. Let's see. Okay, so let's say you start out from point A on this flatter demand curve. Point A, the price of the good is 40, and the quantity which is produced and sold is 100. So revenue is going to be the area of this rectangle here, the whole rectangle, because revenue is price times what? Price times quantity. This whole rectangle here would be your revenue, which is going to be just area of a rectangle is length times width. With the length is going to be 100, and the width is going to be the price, which runs from 0 to 40. So your revenue will be 40 times 100, which is 4,000. Okay. Now, if you increase the price of this good from 40 to 50, look at how consumers are going to reduce the quantity demanded. They're going to reduce from 100 to 20, meaning that the shaded little green rectangle, see this shaded green rectangle, which up all the way down here, is going to be your new revenue. That revenue is going to be a lot smaller, because now you're going to multiply the length times width, which is going to be 20 times 50. So revenue is going to fall to only 1,000 from 4,000. You can imagine. Okay. So you're going to lose 3,000 in total revenue if you raise the price of this product by just $10 from 40 to 50. Okay, now let's look at the demand curve with inelastic demand. The product with inelastic demand, which is the one on the left panel. So we're going to start at point A. When price was 40, consumers were buying what? They were buying 100 units. Okay. Yes, that's right. 100 is here because the place is too tight. 100. So that means that the revenue when price is 40 is going to be 40 times 100, which is 4,000. Now, when you raise the price from 40 to 50, consumers only cut back in small quantity. They're only cutting back 100 to 95. So you're literally not losing anything. Actually, your revenue is going to go up with price increase. So because the the new area of a rectangle, when price goes to 50, is going to be 50 times 95. 50 times 95 is what? It's a lot bigger. It's $4,750. See? But this was your initial revenue when price was 40. So your revenue is going to increase by 750. And that's exactly what we say. When your good has got inelastic demand, it makes proper business sense to always raise the price of the good. You raise the price of that good, you're going to maximize revenue, total revenue. Again, and if your good has got elastic demand, you're going to lose revenue if you increase the price. Decreasing the price would make more proper business sense. If you decrease the price when the good has got elastic demand like this, you actually increase revenue. And try it during your own time. Okay, try a case where you're going to say, well, suppose the price had dropped from 40 to 30, something like that. You're going to see that it's going to be the triangle is going, the rectangle is going to be bigger. Okay. So here's a summary of it all. Summary of the relationship between total revenue and the price level. So when a good has got inelastic demand, where you see the absolute value of elasticity of demand is less than 1, meaning that that's inelastic demand. Total revenue and price move together. That's what I'm saying. Meaning that an increase in price leads to an increase in what? In total revenue. And a decrease in price is going to lead to a decrease in total revenue. But when a good has got elastic demand, where the absolute value of elasticity of demand is greater than 1, that means elastic demand, total revenue and price move in opposite direction. Meaning that raising the price would decrease total revenue. But lowering price would increase total revenue. So there's an inverse correlation between price and total revenue for goods with elastic demand. If you're producing a good which has got a unit elastic demand, meaning that a 1 percentage point increase in price triggers a 1 percentage point decrease in quantity, then price changes, but total revenue remains the same. That's right. That means the percentage change in price is exactly identical to the percentage change in what? In quantity. So that total revenue remains the same. They offset each other. Because if you're saying unit elastic means that we know revenue equals to price times what? Quantity. So unit elastic means that if I increase price by 1 percentage point, quantity decreases by 1 percentage point. So they offset each other. So there's going to be no change in revenue, total revenue. So again, self-check here. If the price elasticity of demand for wine is 1.2 and the price of wine increases, okay, we know that when the price, when the price elasticity of demand is above 1, that means that good has got elastic demand. Wine has got elastic demand. So an increase in price is going to decrease total revenue. Okay? So when the price of wine increases, total revenue of wine is going to decrease. The answer is going to be B. Okay? All right. Okay. So let's do some application here. Now, right now, we have talked about the elasticity of demand, but I'm also going to be talking about the elasticity of supply shortly. So application of demand elasticity, let's talk about productivity has increased in both farming and computer chips. We know that. The first computer chip that was produced in the 1980s was too expensive because we didn't have a lot of chips. But because there's a lot of productivity increase, meaning that chip companies have increased a lot of supply of chips, computer chips. Farming also, same thing with farming. Farming revenues have declined, while revenues for computer chips have increased. So how can we comprehend these two fallacies? The idea here is that the demand for food is inelastic, okay? While the demand for computer chips is elastic, okay? The demand for computer chips is, because the key idea here is that when you increase the production of computer chips, that means the supply curve is going to shift to the right a lot. We look at the amount of computer chips that we were producing in the 1980s, very small. 2024, a lot. Supply is going to, when supply curve shifts to the right a lot, that means prices will be falling. Price falls. And we talked about that since there's an inverse relationship between the price of a good and the total revenue when the good has got elastic demand. Because computer chips are of elastic demand, that means a fall in the price due to what? Productivity increase leads to an increase what? The revenue has gone up. Meanwhile, on for farms, US farms, supply has gone a lot, the supply of food. Productivity on the farm sector has gone up a lot. So the supply of food has shifted a lot to the right, meaning that it has led to a decrease in the food price. But since food has got inelastic demand, we've already shown that goods with inelastic demand, there's a positive correlation between price and what? And total revenue. So since the price fell due to massive production in the farm sector, so is revenue. Revenue will also be falling. So revenue, so that's what it is. So, and you can use the supply and demand to talk about it. So inelastic demand for food, increase in supply, lower price, lower revenue. Elastic demand for computer chips, increase in supply, lower price, higher revenue. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And you can see it here. That's a demand for food items. Because the supply for food in the 1950s was very small. And then over time, supply curve shifts to the right. That led to a decrease in what? Price, because demand is very inelastic. And since food has got inelastic demand, a decrease in price would actually decrease revenue. That's why, profitability of the US farm sector have gone down. Revenue went down. Meanwhile, for chip companies, that's actually gone up. Because the demand for computer chips has got elastic demand. See, the elasticity of demand is much flatter. So in the 1980s, we were producing very small. This is a supply of 1980. And then today, we have massively increased the production of chips. So this massive increase in the production of chips, which is depicted by a large shift of the supply curve to the right, led to a decrease in price, equilibrium price for chips. But because computer chips have got elastic demand, we have to just say that goods with elastic demand, a decrease in price would trigger an increase in revenue. And an increase in price would trigger a decrease in revenue. So that's the reason why computer chip revenue in the chip industry has gone up. So if the demand for, and you can self-check your understanding here. What about if the demand for iPhone is inelastic? That means an increased supply of iPhones will result in what? So we already talked about that already. If the demand for iPhone is inelastic, that is similar to food. If you increase the supply of iPhones, that means the price of iPhones in general are going to fall. And we know that goods which have got inelastic demand, if you want to increase revenue, you need to increase the price. If you want to decrease revenue, you have to decrease the price. So this is going to lead to decreased revenue. Okay. Increasing coin would be offset by much larger decrease in price, which would eventually what? Decrease revenue. So B is a correct choice. Now, so that was elasticity of demand. So let's talk about what about the supply side? Let's talk about elasticity of supply. Okay. Elasticity of supply is going to measure how responsive the quantity supplied is to a change in price. So we're just changing the whatever because the supply curve is upward sloping. Okay. And for your information, the elasticity, anytime you calculate the elasticity of supply, the number is always positive. You don't need to take about it because we know that there's a positive correlation between price of a good and the quantity supplied. The law of supply says that ceteris paribus, which is a Latin word, all else equal, an increase in the price of a good leads to an increase in quantity supply. And a decrease in the price of a good leads to what? To a decrease in quantity supply. That's the reason why the supply curve has got a positive slope. P, Q, slopes upwards. So if we are to calculate elasticity of supply here, it's not difficult. It's just okay. So our first general formula, which I showed you, I'm going to show you both, and then the midpoint formula, just like we did for demand. So the general formula for calculating elasticity of supply, elasticity of supply, you can denote it like that. You take the percentage. This is sign for the percentage change in quantity supply. And then you divide it by percentage change in the price. That's a general formula. But I'm also going to show you the mid-range formula. But before I do that, we have two types of supply. One is a lot steeper. See the one which is a lot more steeper? The steeper the line, the bigger the slope. The flatter the line, the smaller the slope. So so that tells you how suppliers of goods respond. If you're producing this good with much inelastic supply, which the supply curve is a lot vertical, a lot steeper than a good which has got elastic supply, which is a lot flatter. The supply curve which is flatter means that suppliers respond too much to any given price change. A small increase in price triggers a disproportionately larger increase in quantity supply. And a small decrease in price also triggers a disproportionately larger decrease in quantity supply. But if a good has got inelastic supply, that means any small increase in price is going to trigger a disproportionately smaller increase in quantity supply. That's right. And vice versa. As you can see, if we all begin at a point A, where the price of both of these goods, supply curve one represents a supply for some good, which is could be maybe cigarettes. And then the flatter supply could be the supply of some good which has got which is more elastic. But we're saying at the beginning of time, those two goods have the same price, 40-40, and consumers will demand 80-80 of both goods. Now, when the price goes up from 40 to 50, look, the good with inelastic supply, where the supply curve is a lot steeper, supply curve one, we're only going to move to point C. So a 10 unit increase in price is going to lead to only a 5 unit increase in quantity. Quantity only increased from 80 to 85. But the good which has got elastic supply, where the supply curve is a lot flatter, that small increase in price from 40 to 50 increases quantity from 80 to 170. You move up to point B. So you can see there's a certainly larger increase in supply for goods with elastic supply. Okay. And so the fundamental determinants are quickly per unit cost. So let's talk about how we determine elasticity of supply. This has to do with something to do with cost. So if you're the producer of a good and the price of your good goes up, you make more money by supplying more. But supplying more depends on how it costs you to produce that good. It has something to do with the per unit cost. Okay? If increased production requires much higher per unit cost, the supply curve is going to be inelastic. Producers are not going to respond that much to any given price increase because it costs a lot to produce additional quantity. But if the per unit cost of producing that good is quite small, then that supply curve is going to be more elastic. In other words, producers are going to respond disproportionately to increasing the quantity supply because it costs them less. Okay? So whether a good has got elastic or inelastic supply depends on the per unit cost of producing that good. The larger is the per unit cost of production, okay, the more inelastic the supply curve is going to be, or the smaller responsiveness from producers or sellers to any given price change. But if a good has got elastic supply, that basically means that the per unit cost of producing that good is very small. So any increase in price is going to trigger a disproportionately larger increase in quantity supplied by the suppliers of that good. The supply curve. And so once you calculate all those, and this is going to be close to what we did for demand. There are three types. So if elasticity of supply is less than 1, we say the good is what has got inelastic supply. So you can summarize them here. If elasticity of supply is greater than 1, the good has got elastic supply. And if elasticity of supply equals to 1, this good is what we call unit elastic. That means a 1 percentage point increase in the price level leads to a 1 percentage point increase in the quantity supply, and vice versa. Let's continue. So supply is more elastic when the industry can be expanded without causing a big increase in the demand for that industry's inputs. That's right. So if your company is in an industry where industry can be expanded without causing any big increase in the demand for that industry's inputs, then the supply is going to be elastic. Because the key idea is that if you're an industry where when the industry is getting expanded, then it triggers the high demand for the inputs or raw material goods that are used for producing what? That good. That means that producing that good is going to have huge costs. Okay? So the per unit cost is going to rise. But if in that industry, industry expands and the cost of raw material goods don't change that much, okay, then that good is going to have more elastic demand. That means the per unit cost is going to stay the same. But as the industry expands and the input costs go up, or the demand for raw material for inputs for producing that good in that industry goes up, that means that the per unit cost of producing that good has gone up. So you're going to produce less of that good for any small increase in price. So the supply curve is going to be inelastic. So for example, the local supply of a good is much more elastic than the global supply. That is also true. So it depends on whether you're producing a good for the local market or for the global market. Okay? Because the global market is tricky. You may have inelastic demand. And then supply tends to be more elastic in the long run than in the short run. That's true. In the short run, it's very difficult for farms, for many US farms, to expand production, okay, for any given price, because most companies, maybe they don't have a lot of resources available. But as you allow time, they can find ways of raising money or resources that can allow them to produce more, respond to that price level change. So that means in the short run, the company's budget are tight. So when price changes, they may not have the luxury of increasing supply in the short run. But in the long run, you give a little bit of time, then they should be able to respond to that price change. Okay. So I'll give you several examples of what, like Picasso painting, a perfectly inelastic supply curve. The supply of Picasso painting is very inelastic, but the supply of toothpicks is perfectly inelastic. Okay. Okay. So I summarize the factors that determine the whatever. I already discussed them. You can go and check the summaries and paint it in red in that table. So here's one question. Would the supply of roofing nails in Fargo, North Dakota, be relatively elastic or inelastic? Okay. Supply of roofing nails. It would be easy to increase production of constant unit costs. Nails are a small share of the market for galvanized steel. And the local supply in Fargo is more elastic than the global supply. Yeah, so it would be more, the answer would be A. So here's a formula for the what? Calculating elasticity of supply. The general formula, you take the percentage change in quantity supply, divide by the percentage change in what? In the price level. I wrote that formula earlier on. Okay. When I put delta here, delta is a Latin word we use a lot in it. Don't get confused. Delta stands for the lowercase letter of the alphabet, or the Greek letter of the alphabet, stands for change. So this is percentage change in quantity supply divided by percentage change in price. Delta stands for change. Okay. So in there I write delta. Don't get confused, because that's just a representation for change. And then when we use the midpoint formula for calculating elasticity of supply, you see, we do know you take the change in supply divided by the average supply. Because remember, when price changes, producers are increasing supply, right? When price changes, they're increasing or decreasing supply. So there's going to be 2 points on the supply curve. So to calculate, you want to see the supply after the price change minus quantity supplied before the price change. Divide by the averages of those two quantities, the before and after price change quantities. And then divide by price after the change in price, and then minus price before the change, divided by the average of the two prices. So it's similar to the demand, the midpoint formula for calculating the demand, elasticity of demand. Not any different. So here's some of the application that are so just to wind up a little bit here. There's been a program by the federal government about gun buyback programs. So several cities in the United States have spent millions of dollars buying back guns. So one part of the gun control policies out there. The objective was to reduce the number of guns so as to lower crime rates. Principals of economists predict that these programs are unlikely to reduce the number of guns on the streets. Why? When police buy guns, the demand for guns increases. Since the supply of guns to a local region is very elastic, the street price of guns does not increase. You see that? As a result, there's no decrease in the number of guns on the street. So the policy is not going to change anything. It's kind of like when illustrated here. The demand for buyback, the demand with no buyback. So the price will not change at all. Okay, so that formula is most likely, that policy is most likely going to fail. You can also think about economics of housing supply. The price of housing in the United States has increased dramatically. Like places like Austin, you guys know that over the past 10 years, that's increased a lot. Increase in population and income could be one reason for the change as the increased demand. But increase in demand have not led to increased housing prices in all cities. Remember that. The answer depends on the elasticity of supply. Okay? How elastic the supply of housing is. Okay? So if the supply for housing in cities, some cities are relatively inelastic, you can see that. You can see that an increase in the price triggers a disproportionately lower a decrease in what? In quantity, or a decrease in price triggers a relatively high what? Small increase in quantity demanded. So I think the rest are kind of like basically like you can forget about these last two slides. I'm not going to touch you on that. So the key takeaways from this chapter is that we just talked about elasticity of demand, how it measures how responsive the quantity demanded is to a change in price. And we talked about how elasticity of demand also tells you how revenues respond to changes in price. If elasticity of demand is less than 1, you know that the price and revenue move together. We talked about that. An increase in price would lead to an increase in revenue because that means the demand curve has got inelastic demand. The good has got inelastic demand. But if the elasticity of demand is greater than 1, that means that the good has got elastic demand, then price and revenue move in opposite direction. Raising prices would what? Would decrease total revenue. But decreasing price in that case would actually raise revenue. Elasticity can be used to explain many real-world problems. Okay? So again, this concludes my discussion of this chapter on elasticity. Make sure you watch the video. There's a small chapter on government price controls, how government can interfere in the market for goods to set the prices of goods. We're going to talk about price ceiling and price floor. For example, in New York City, we're not going to cover chapter 6 and 7. We're going to jump from chapter 5 to chapter 8. Chapter 6 and 7 are kind of irrelevant. We talked about how when the government decides to set the price of certain goods, how that interferes with that market. Okay, the ramification of government price control. For example, in New York City, the government sets the price of apartment. They control the price of apartment. If you're a landlord found charging, say, $5,000, above $5,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City, you'll be breaking the law. So they have rent control measures in New York City. Another example of how government can control the price of goods is labor. The US government passed into law the minimum wage. Minimum wage says that it's illegal to pay a worker a wage below a certain threshold. In Texas, the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Okay? So we're going to talk about how if the government steps in the market and starts, controlling the prices of certain goods. What would be the ramification of such price controls in that particular market? You're going to see to some great degree, such price controls could actually cause shortages. Like in New York City, rent control actually tend to cause shortages of apartments. And again, as I told you that your exam was scheduled for Tuesday, so I might assign, because you're going to do it online as well. I'm going to assign that exam on Tuesday at Canvas, but I'm going to make it due on Wednesday. I'm going to be assigning quiz number 2, which is going to be based on this chapter and the chapter next, which I'm going to be talking about in the recording next, chapter on price control. So quiz 2 is going to be, allows you to practice on this concept of elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply, plus price control, like price ceiling and price floor, which is chapter 8. So please don't study chapter 6 and 7. We're not going to cover chapter 6 and 7. The book has got 38 chapters. There's no way you complete 38 chapters in 5 weeks. So we have to be very strategic and cover only those chapters which are relevant to this class. All right, I'll talk to you again soon when I start covering talking about chapter 8 on price controls. Thank you.